John chapter 9. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me, while it is day. The night cometh, when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground, and made clay of the spittle. And he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said unto him, Go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation, sent. He went his way therefore, and washed, and came seeing. The neighbors therefore, and they which before had seen him that he was blind, said, Is not this he that sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others said, He is like him. But he said, I am he. Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes opened? He answered and said, A man that is called Jesus made clay, and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam, and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight. Then said they unto him, Where is he? He said, I know not. They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. And it was the Sabbath day, when Jesus made the clay, and opened his eyes. Then again the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He said unto them, He put clay upon mine eyes, and I washed, and do see. Therefore said some of the Pharisees, This man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, How can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them. They say unto the blind man again, What sayest thou of him that he hath opened thine eyes? He said, He is a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind, and received his sight, until they called the parents of him that had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, Is this your son, who ye say was born blind? How then doth he now see? His parents answered them and said, We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now seeth we know not, or who hath opened his eyes we know not. He is of age, ask him. He shall speak for himself. These words spake his parents, because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already, that if any man did confess that he was Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. Therefore said his parents, He is of age, ask him. Then again called they the man that was blind, and said unto him, Give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered and said, Whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereas I was blind, now I see. Then said they to him again, What did he to thee? How opened he thine eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and ye did not hear. Wherefore would ye hear it again? Will ye also be his disciples? Then they reviled him, and said, Thou art his disciple. We are Moses' disciples.
Hey, Shalom. All praises to Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Bashem Rakakwadash. Hey, much mercy to you, sincere brothers out there, the true house of David. All you brothers that are in the spirit, that can actually understand this new covenant, that are redeemed to understand, that have the mind to stretch to understand. That's what this is. Making men see through the spirit. Has nothing to do with you, with somebody carnally seeing you so they can understand you. If you're spiritual, you don't need to see somebody to really understand what they're saying. And this is the blind man the Lord healed. See, blind men that couldn't see at all, the Lord was healing them. So you don't need to see somebody to help men see in this time, if you get what I'm saying. So men are beginning to see, guys. Eyes are being made open blind. And this is one of the particular times when the Lord healed that blind man. And the scripture tell you that they didn't like the fact that Yahweh Shai healed that blind man. So I want to read a little bit through this chapter because a lot of guys are in that spirit how they were when the Lord was healing and doing certain things. They didn't accept it because it wasn't a part of what the synagogue was doing. Even though the Lord was doing things that they wasn't, they still didn't accept it. And that's the spirit of a lot of guys. They're in that spirit of still being under Moses. And this is the same spirit that a lot of guys are in, even with the new covenant. So like if you're in that spirit, then you're in the spirit like how they were in this chapter, man, in this very heavy John chapter 9. This is a heavy chapter. It's chapters all throughout that shows you the mentality of the wicked scribes and the Pharisees that was up in the synagogues, showing you that they were locked into in the synagogues, they were locked into that old law of Moses. And this is when the Lord was doing all those healings and bringing the new doctrine. So it is the same. Guys are in the same spirit today, holding on to Moses in the old and the new covenant. It's crazy. And guys really can't separate the two. They don't know what to do. So this is showing you right here that through believing in the Lord and his doctrine, it heals blind. It heals the blind. Not the doctrine that was in the synagogues that was dominated by the old law of Moses. So it's really heavy in this time that the same people that was against the Lord back then, they're against him now, and they still have the veil is still over their goddamn face. You know, their understanding has been darkened, like the brother said real quick. Matter of fact, let me grab that before I get John chapter 9. So you got to understand that the same way they were against the Lord, they were against him, they're against him now. You see, they're not fully with the Lord yet. You got a whole camp saying they're not with the Lord. And you have to understand and see what's going on. You see what guys are teaching. And just because you're not part of a synagogue, they disregard it. That's why it's actually heavy. Guys' eyes been made darkened because they are part of their understanding been darkened, like the brother left. This is Ephesians 4:18. It says, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them. Woo! So at that time, they were ignorant of who the Lord was, even though he just healed that blind man. So that's just like it right now. Like certain things that we're saying is helping men being able to really see. And if you really like look at it, the road is getting like narrow and narrow. You see what I'm saying, in this time? Because you find out that men really don't understand like that. And really all it is you understanding that you got to follow the Lord. You can't put the old covenant over the new. You have to understand that the Lord is the one that heals now. The Lord is the one that's showing mercy now, not Moses. There's no justification in Moses. You have to put your belief in the Lord. And that is the garments, the understanding. That's why in 2 Corinthians, the scripture tell you that you having the mind of Yahushua. So you have a certain mind. You having the mind of the anointed. So a lot of guys' understanding has been darkened in this time. Ephesians 4:18, it says, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness in their heart. Right. So you don't have a new heart if you can't understand that that Moses has no power over the ones that actually are redeemed. So if you're not really redeemed, then you're in darkness because you don't understand that you can't have two masters and you can't mix the old covenant with the new. Even though you have things you can go on the old covenant to and refer back and look it up, it just don't hold no power. You do have story and things in there, but what they're letting you know that the Lord was somebody that was going to come And then Moses said, like unto me. So like unto Moses was given the law. So like unto the Lord is going to be given the one that the laws fall on now. So you can't get out of this Egypt holding that old law. You have to the way to get out of this Egypt in this time, you have to be under Yahweh Shai now, which Yahweh Shai is the Passover. So, but you have to have them in your mind. So if your mind been darkened, then you don't have Yahweh Shai written in you. So you don't understand that the two covenants can't be mixed. And Yahweh Shai is superior. So having their Ephesians 4:18, and having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of power through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness in their heart. That's right. So the scripture tell you that we have the mind of God, and that's the understanding of God, because we can understand certain things a lot of guys can't. So that is heavy. 1 Corinthians 2:16. It says, for who have known the mind of power, the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct them, but we have the mind of power. That's why it tells you in this chapter, for a natural man can't receive the things that are of God. So what it was showing you in John 8, was that John 9, that those men that was under that old law of Moses, they couldn't receive Yahweh Shai. In John 8, and I'm going to read it. This is John 8 and 9. And 1. It says, and Yahweh Shai passed by and saw a man which was blind from his birth. And the disciples asked him, saying, Master, how did sin? It says, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Yahweh Shai answered, neither have this man sinned nor his parents, but the works of power shall be made manifest in him. You see that? So by him being healed, this was the works of the manifest of power being manifest in him, that the Lord is the one that you should seek after. This is the one who you should praise now, because the power went to him. So it's being manifest in these times that the new covenant is healing men and it's opening men's eyes up in this time. But understand, it is just like the old times, the synagogues and the powers that be and so on and so forth. Is rejected because they are natural. Guys that are of the old law, according to Romans 9 and Galatians, the desolate guys that are of that old law, it is impossible for them to understand the new covenant totally. So by not understanding that the two laws are separate, and by you trying to bring the new law to the old like they mixed together, then you're trying to bring men back to another yoke. And so in John 9, these ones in the synagogue, they couldn't accept Yahweh Shai because they was disciples of Moses. And I'm gonna read it. And this is the same thing today. Guys that are in the flesh, they are disciples of Moses, so their doctrine has to involve Moses. When that's fine, but for the new covenant, this don't have nothing to do with Moses, and you're not going to mix Moses. You can't mix Moses and the Lord in it together. You have to make it known that the Lord is superior. So just like they didn't accept the Lord in John 9, guys are not really fully accepting the Lord in this time. This is John 9:3, and Yahweh Shai answered and said, this man sinneth, nor, it says, neither have this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man could work. That's right. So the Lord said he must do the work right now. He must do what he was sent here to do. And that's the few of us too. And this time we're sent here to do a work, to give understanding. That's it. But if you don't have the heart of the mind, you can't give a particular type of understanding. So you have to understand this whole thing. You have to understand, and by teaching Yahushua, things are changing. Men are actually repenting and waking up to the new covenant, becoming strong and separating themselves from synagogues. This is what was happening in the times when the Lord came on the scene. He was doing a lot of healing, but he wasn't doing it in he wasn't doing it in the name of Moses. You see, it's crazy, man. So the Lord didn't destroy the old law of Moses. He just fulfilled it by fulfilling and making it known that the law is of him. Through what Moses said. Moses said, hey, you got to follow him in all things. So this is what the Lord fulfilling that. Just like all through the Old Testament, in Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Zechariah, fucking Isaiah, all these chapters, they were speaking of the Lord. So he's fulfilling the law, the most major prophecy and coming. That is the major prophecy, Yahushua bringing the new covenant. That is a heavy prophecy which everybody downplays, and a lot of guys are waiting on, because they don't have nothing to do with it. And the majority of guys that say they have something to do with it, they can't even understand that Moses don't belong with it. Moses is his own law. You see what I'm saying? It's heavy, man. So the way you tell where somebody is in their doctrine, because their doctrine, you have to have the mind of God. You're not praying to Moses, but then you have to make it understood that Moses, his law holds no justification in it. So basically it's dead. It's Romans 8. The old law is the condemnation of death and administration of death, and the new law is life, where the spirit is. You can't mix death with life, and teach men that they're in the old and they're waiting. And then for guys teaching men that the old is a part of the new. No, you can't. It don't roll like that. Then you don't understand why the Lord said, don't put a new garment on the old. Don't put an old garment on the new. Because they like the old better. You see, so John 9:5, it says, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. He says, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And when he had spoken this, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with clay. That's right. So in the same way, we're helping man see today, just by what? Understanding. See, the carnal man believed before he was even blind. You see? And he said unto him, go wash thy... He says, go wash thee in the pool of Salem, which the interpretation sent. And he went there and washed and came seeing. And the neighbors therefore, they which had seen before in him was blind, said, is this not him? He sat that begged. And some said, this is he. And others said, he is like him. But he said, I am he. It says, therefore said they unto him, how are thy eyes open? You see? So how are their eyes open? Really open. The Lord was really opening men's eyes, not just telling you, just like today, guys are just telling you about the shit in the world. And the only answer for that is having faith in the Lord. The scriptures say nothing's impossible with God. But once you have that faith in him, then nothing's impossible. A lot of guys really don't have that faith, because if they did, they would just be teaching the Lord and making it known that it's about the Lord alone. But guys are still holding on to the flesh. So it's not a works as of him that calleth. But the elect are going to have a particular different type of work. It's going to be distinct. And you have to be aware of a lot of guys teaching the new covenant without that certain understanding. That the old and the new are not the same. They're different. You have to believe in the Lord to be spiritually minded. The new covenant is a spiritual minded covenant. The old covenant is what? The covenant, the scriptures tell you that the old covenant is administration of sin and death. It tells you that. That's why everything went to the Lord, and by you believing in the Lord, your eyes could really be made open. That's why if you really are stumbling, it's because you really don't believe in the Lord. You're not really of the Lord to understand Him. So a lot of guys are mixing the old with the new. That's why you're in the carnal mind still, because you're trying to bring the old into it. You think this is something that has to do with you being seen or garments. You got your mind, you're thinking carnal because that's the only way you could think. And that's how they were in this chapter. Guys couldn't really fucking, they really can't see. Now let's jump down a little bit. I want to jump down here and read this. So everybody in this chapter, when you go to it, they were like amazed that the Lord was opening his eyes. But they didn't like Yahushua, just like with Lazarus, when he raised Lazarus back from the dead. And it's just like when he healed that blind man, a lot of people, they didn't fucking like it. John 9:22. It says, these words, it says, John 9:22, it says, these words spake his parents because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that Yahushua is the anointed, he should be put out of the synagogue. Woo! So let me read that again, man. It says, these words spake his parents because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that he was the anointed, he should be put out of the synagogue. Put out of the synagogue. So if guys were confessing that they actually believed in Yahushua back in them times, they would be what? Put out of the synagogue. Because that word confess goes into agreeing. So if you were agreeing with Yahushua, your ass would be put out of the synagogues. That is where the prosecution began that the scriptures talk about. The same prosecution in Acts. You'll be put out of synagogues for confessing Yahushua, really agreeing with him. It says, therefore said his parents, he is of age, asked him. Then again called the man that was blind, said unto him, give God the praise. He says, we know that this man is a sinner. So they didn't like Yahushua actually healing. So to a lot of guys, if you're not moving according to the way of the synagogue and Moses and shit like that, you're a sinner. It's like if you were blind and Yahushua healed you, in them times they didn't care because it didn't come from the synagogue. You see what I'm saying? It's crazy. Or the synagogue didn't do it. Or they're still of the old, so it don't matter if he's healing you. That's how guys are looking at us too. They say, so what? They're teaching new covenant and they're opening men's eyes. They're not in no camp. This is the same things. You got to understand, Yahushua was teaching a new covenant basically from scratch. But he was sent to do that. So a lot of people, they didn't believe in Yahushua. They were in the synagogues. They didn't want to be kicked out of the synagogues. Now, John 9:25, and he answered and said, whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereof I was blind, now I see. You see that? So you would be technically, you a sinner if you wasn't believing in that shit that they were teaching in them synagogues of the old law of Moses. So you'll be a sinner or an outcast. That's how they treated the Lord. And he just he's healing guys. This is the same thing that's happening today. If guys keeping that old law of Moses and by the new covenant really being taught, even guys that say they're teaching it, they're hooked on the law of Moses. And men's eyes are being opened. Through Yahushai, not through Moses. Guys' eyes are really being open. They're really like seeing this thing for what it really is. And people don't like that because it didn't come from the churches or the groups or the synagogues, the camps, etc., etc. It's coming from a few men. Yes, certainly a lot of people are teaching the new covenant, which is good, but a few of us really have the understanding. So what's happening is people's eyes are really being opened for real. Because this don't have nothing to do with Moses. So the mentality of these groups is that if you wouldn't follow in the old law of Moses, then you're a sinner because you're not doing it the way like the synagogue. That's how guys are. They're hooked on that Moses shit. John 9 and 26. Then said they to him again, what did he to you, to thee? How opened thee eyes? And he answered and told you already. And he answered them, I have told you already, and ye did not hear. Wherefore would ye hear it again? Will ye also be his disciples? So he kept telling them over and over how the Lord healed them, and then they wanted to hear it again. And then the man said, so what? You keep asking them, do you want to be his disciple? Do you want to be his disciples? They kept asking him because he was really blind. So people were really blind, and people are really seeing now due to the doctrine and the teaching of the new covenant. It's heavy. Now check this out. And they reviled him and said, he says, thou art his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. You see that? Thou art his disciples, but we are Moses' disciples. And before that, man wasn't seeing. That guy was blind. So that's what's happening now. The new covenant is being taught, but a lot of you guys are Moses' disciples at heart. You see what I'm saying? Because the majority of you guys are of the old, so you're in the spirit of this synagogue that has to keep the old law of Moses. It's heavy, man. And it says, we know that God spake unto Moses. As for this fellow, we know not from whence he is. You see that? So they saying, hey, we know that God spake to Moses, but we don't know who this guy is. You see that? It says, the man answering said unto them, why hereon is this marvelous thing that ye know not from whence he is, and yet he opened mine eyes. Woo! So there wasn't opening nobody's eyes under the law of Moses. You see what I'm saying? The synagogues had people walking around blind. Just like today, you think you know all this info and the prophecies and shit, but really you're blind in these fucking camps. Because you're not following the Lord. You're just following men and their camp doctrine. So guys that are bringing Moses into the new, they're blind themselves too. Their heart and their eyes have been darkened. This is heavy stuff. Yeah, this is heavy, man. It says, now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshiper of God and do of his will, he hear. It says, his will, he heareth. So any man doing the Lord's will, the Lord is hearing you. But he's not hearing guys that are under that old law of Moses. So to God, if you didn't really believe in Yahushai, if you don't really believe in the Lord in this time, then you're an actual sinner. And a lot of you guys are not, guys that are mixing the doctrine, they're adding the old to the new. The Lord said, don't do that. So you're transgressing with that understanding. You just have to follow the Lord. It says, since the world began, Was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was blind? If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. Woo! So if the new covenant that we're teaching is not of God, we could do nothing. But there's so much understanding coming from Yahweh Shai. Just like guys' eyes are literally blind in understanding by the new covenant being taught, it is helping men. So Yahweh Shai was healing the blind that was literally blind in them times, certain things that the synagogues couldn't do. They didn't have the power to heal men that were blind. So they said they were Moses' disciples. Let's read that again, John 9:28. Then they reviled him and said, Thou art his disciples, but we are Moses' disciples. It says, For we know that God spake unto Moses, as for this fellow, we know not from whence he is. Woo! That's how cold they were. They didn't believe nothing in Yahweh Shai, even though he was healing the blind and shit. It's heavy. But let me get out of here, man. I got to get out of here. I'll speak with you brothers on the next one. It will not stop. You have to believe in Yahweh Shai. That's where the healing comes in, not in the old law of Moses. You know, that's the point. Yahweh Shai has the power, not Moses. Hey, with that, shalom. Repent to the new covenant.